Imagine thinking the stage was yours, only for someone to rip away the spotlight in an instant. The morning began like so many others in Donald Trump's world, the cameras waiting, the headlines pre-written, the air charged with his familiar brand of showmanship. He was ready to dominate the cycle once again, certain that every network, every pundit, every rival would be forced to bend to his orbit. For Trump, it was supposed to be a victory lap, a carefully orchestrated spectacle to remind the country that his shadow still loomed large. But power has a way of attracting challengers. And on this day, from across the continent, a different figure stepped forward. Gavin Newsom, Governor of California, walked to a podium with none of the bluster, but all of the timing. His announcement was sharp, calculated, and perfectly placed, a blade of words designed to cut through the noise and land exactly where it would hurt the most. Within minutes, the storyline shifted. Anchors interrupted their coverage. Analysts scrambled to react. Trump's thunder, once guaranteed, evaporated before his eyes. The man who built his empire on commanding attention suddenly found himself robbed of it, eclipsed by an adversary he had long dismissed as irrelevant. This wasn't just political theater. It was a rare inversion of the natural order, a day when the king of spectacle was outmaneuvered on his own battlefield. And as the camera zoomed in on Newsom's steady expression, the message was unmistakable. Trump no longer owned the spotlight. But the true question lingered in the air like static before a storm. Was this merely a headline-grabbing stunt, or the beginning of something far more dangerous to Trump's grip on power? For years, the political landscape was defined by one gravitational force. Donald Trump didn't just compete for attention, he consumed it. Every outburst, every rally, every insult became a headline. His rivals learned quickly that to challenge him was to be swallowed whole by the spectacle, reduced to background noise in a story he authored daily. Even out of office, his influence lingered. The Republican Party bent to his will, donors courted. His favor, and the media, whether fawning or furious, could not resist him. Trump had turned politics into theater, and in his theater there was room for only one star. And far from Washington, on the other side of the country, stood Gavin Newsom, Governor of California, a man presiding over a state that conservatives often mocked and dismissed. To Trump's base, Newsom was just another liberal punching bag, a caricature of coastal elitism. But those who paid attention knew better. Behind the easy smile and polished delivery was a sharp-tongued tactician, unafraid to spar with right-wing media, quick to dismantle an opponent's talking point with precision. He wasn't a national figure, not yet. He was a rising presence, underestimated, caricatured, but waiting for his moment. The contrast was stark. Trump, the bombastic showman, thrived on chaos. Newsom, the slick Californian, thrived on calm, curated presentation. One dominated the stage through sheer volume, the other through controlled precision. And in the normal order of American politics, Trump was the constant headline maker, while Newsom remained a regional actor, relevant only when the national press needed a soundbite from the West Coast. That was the balance. Trump's megaphone drowned out challengers. Newsom, like many Democrats, existed in his shadow. To imagine anyone stealing Trump's spotlight seemed impossible. He was the disruptor, the one who made presidents and governors dance to his script. But normalcy never lasts long in American politics, and this fragile balance was about to shatter. It began with an ordinary announcement on Trump's calendar. Another rally, another round of self-congratulation, another chance to dominate the day's headlines with promises, grievances, and fire-breathing soundbites. His team had primed the press with teasers, whispering that a big reveal was coming. Reporters dutifully lined up, ready to capture the spectacle. By all accounts, it was set to be a textbook Trump day, loud, brash, and inescapable. But hundreds of miles away, a quieter storm was brewing. Gavin Newsom had chosen his moment with surgical precision. The cameras gathered in Sacramento looked almost routine at first, just another policy update from California's governor. Yet there was a glint in his eye, a weight to his words as he stepped to the microphone. And then, with practiced calm, he dropped the line that would ricochet through every newsroom in America. Newsom announced not just a policy, but a move, with national implications. A multi-state tour, framed as a defense of democracy itself, directly challenging the narrative Trump had spent years constructing. He positioned California as a blueprint, contrasting it with the chaos Trump embodied. He invited Americans to imagine a different future, and he did it all while Trump was still rehearsing his applause lines. The timing was merciless. Within minutes, cable news anchors interrupted their programming to cut live to Newsom. Social media feeds lit up with clips of his speech. Analysts who had pre-written their commentary on Trump scrambled to rewrite. Suddenly, the question was not, what did Trump announce, but what did Newsom just do? One press conference, one announcement, and the news cycle flipped overnight. Trump's carefully built moment crumbled before it even began. The man who had long thrived on hijacking others' oxygen found himself gasping for it. And as his rally kicked off, the crowd cheered as always. But the cameras, the headlines, the national conversation had already shifted. For Trump, it was an insult, a humiliation. For Newsom, it was an introduction, a declaration that he could play on the biggest stage and seize the narrative when it mattered most. And for the rest of America, it was the first glimpse of a battle that promised not just sparks, but a firestorm. Long before Gavin Newsom stepped into the frame, the stage belonged to Donald Trump. He didn't just appear in headlines, he manufactured them. His genius, if it could be called that, lay in a ruthless instinct for spectacle. Outrage was his oxygen, and he learned early on that in the age of 24-hour news, volume was power. Say something shocking. Say it louder than anyone else and the cameras would follow. What others called recklessness, he branded as authenticity. What others saw as chaos, he wielded as control. By the time he entered politics, Trump had perfected the art of bending narratives. A single tweet could shift markets, derail legislation, or ruin reputations. Anchors who loathed him couldn't stop covering him. Networks that mocked him still cashed in on the ratings he delivered. Every insult, every nickname, every carefully staged fight became a headline. He understood, better than anyone, that politics in modern America was less about policy and more about performance. And on that stage, Trump was the unrivaled showman. His opponents tried to fight him with logic, with fact checks, with decorum. It never worked. He bulldozed through conventions of civility, turning debates into gladiator pits where he alone knew the rules. He bullied rivals with taunts, humiliated them with sound bites, and forced even seasoned politicians to play defense. For Trump, dominance wasn't just about winning elections. It was about saturating the airwaves so thoroughly that no one else could breathe. This strategy made him untouchable, even when scandals erupted, even when his own words threatened. To sink him, he spun the chaos into fuel. Every controversy kept him at the center of the conversation. He thrived in storms because he was the storm. And whether Americans loved him or hated him, they were talking about him. Always. For years, it seemed impossible to break this cycle. Democrats tried to rise above him, and in doing so, they ceded the spectacle to him. Republicans tried to outdo him, and they were swallowed alive. Trump's media grip was total. He had turned the presidency into a stage show, and even out of office, the spotlight followed him, as if tethered by some unbreakable cord. This was the villain's rise, not a subtle takeover, but a relentless bombardment that left no silence, no space for another star. The more the press resisted him, the more they needed him. The more his rivals attacked, the stronger his grip became. He was the man who redefined the rules of attention, and in his world, attention was power. But power invites challengers, and while Trump basked in his empire of spectacle, far from Mar-a-Lago, a governor with a different kind of weapon was preparing to step onto his stage. Trump's dominance over the political stage felt unshakable, until Gavin Newsom decided to test it. For years, he had been cast as a California curiosity, a governor known for sleek speeches and progressive policies but dismissed as irrelevant outside the West Coast. Yet beneath that easy dismissal was calculation. Newsom had studied Trump's playbook, learned his rhythms, and understood the one truth at the heart of modern politics. Timing is everything. And so, when he chose his moment, he didn't whisper. He thundered. His announcement landed not as a routine press event, but as a jolt that reverberated across the political spectrum. Newsom framed his move as a national call to arms, a defense of democracy, of immigrant families, of the very idea that America could belong to everyone, not just to the loudest bully with a microphone. He spoke not with Trump's bombast, but with piercing precision, the kind that slices through noise rather than adding to it. The brilliance lay in the contrast. Trump commanded attention by dominating chaos. Newsom commanded it by offering clarity. Trump roared, but Newsom's words carried the weight of inevitability. He spoke with the confidence of someone who knew he was punching up, and welcomed the fight. This isn't just about California, his message implied. This is about who we are as a nation. The underdog energy was undeniable. Here was a Democratic governor standing on the steps of Sacramento, deliberately casting himself in the role of challenger, daring the political giant to acknowledge him. And in that moment, Newsom wasn't just another governor. He became the symbol of defiance, the man unafraid to stare directly at Trump's spotlight and step into it. Strategically, it was flawless. By choosing his timing to coincide with Trump's rally, Newsom forced a split screen, and he won the comparison. While Trump rehashed grievances, Newsom projected forward momentum. While Trump insulted, Newsom inspired. And while Trump demanded loyalty, Newsom offered belonging. The cameras caught it. The analysts caught it. Most importantly, the public caught it. Social media buzzed with clips of Newsom's speech, framed in contrast to Trump's recycled lines. For progressives, it was a rush of validation. Here, finally, was someone willing to fight on equal footing, someone who could seize attention without becoming a caricature of Trump's style. Newsom wasn't just speaking to California, he was speaking to America. His words told a story of resistance, of a future not defined by Trump's shadow, but by a broader vision of inclusion and pride. And in doing so, he showed that the spotlight could be wrestled away, not by shouting louder, but by offering something worth listening to. The counterstrike had been launched, and as Trump's empire of attention trembled for the first time in years, the battle lines were drawn. The moment Newsom's announcement hit, the clash was inevitable. Trump, the self-styled master of attention, did not take humiliation lightly. Within hours, his counterattack roared across social media. Truth Social posts spewed insults, mocking Newsom's slick presentation, belittling California as a failed state, and branding the governor as nothing more than a puppet for liberal elites. His allies amplified the barrage. Fox News segments mocked San Francisco's homelessness crisis, conservative pundits painted Newsom as a fraud, and Trump himself leaned into the role of wounded king, furious that someone dared steal his crown of attention. On the other side, Newsom's team remained calm, almost surgical. They knew the storm was coming and had planned for it. Every insult Trump hurled became a new talking point. Every meme Trump supporters posted was reframed as proof of fear. Instead of retreating, Newsom leaned in, clipping his sharpest lines, pushing them across digital platforms and letting the contrast do the work. Where Trump raged, Newsom projected steadiness. Where Trump ridiculed, Newsom smiled. It was a duel of tone as much as message, and audiences across America felt the difference. Cable news lit up. CNN panels dissected Newsom's words like they were seismic. MSNBC cast him as the long-awaited foil to Trump's chaos, while conservative outlets doubled down on vilification, insisting his big announcement was a desperate stunt. The coverage itself became the battlefield. Trump's defenders saw betrayal, the media giving oxygen to an unworthy rival. Newsom's supporters saw a breakthrough finally, a Democrat commanding airtime not as a victim of Trump's taunts, but as an aggressor in his own right. Meanwhile, the internet turned it into culture war theater. On the left, memes spread of Newsom walking calmly while Trump fumed, the polished governor versus the red-faced mogul. Hashtags trended celebrating the spotlight theft. On the right, new nicknames were coined, mocking Newsom's slick hair and California swagger, portraying him as shallow Hollywood with no substance. Both sides turned the moment into fuel, each camp rallying with fresh energy. But beneath the noise, something deeper was happening. For years, Trump had dictated the terms of engagement, forcing opponents to play defense. Now, suddenly, a rival had forced him onto defense. For progressives, it felt like a release. Someone had finally cracked the code of Trump's dominance. For conservatives, it felt like betrayal. How dare the media shift focus away from their champion? How dare anyone suggest the spotlight could shine elsewhere? And so the country watched two stories unfold at once. In Trump's version, Newsom was a pretender, an overhyped governor from a collapsing state, a man who dared poke the king but would be crushed under the weight of his own arrogance. In Newsom's version, he was the principled challenger, standing tall against a bully, unflinching under the hailstorm of insults, showing Americans that chaos could be met with composure. Two narratives, one nation, no middle ground. The battle. Lines stretched beyond speeches and headlines. It was about who could shape reality itself. Trump shouted louder, trying to drown the moment in fury. Newsom spoke cleaner, ensuring the echo lasted longer. And, as the dust settled on that day's clash, one fact stood clear. America wasn't just witnessing a political skirmish. It was witnessing the beginning of a duel for the nation's very imagination. Two worlds, one story, and America forced to pick a side. The backlash was swift and merciless. Trump, wounded but not defeated, unleashed the full fury of his arsenal. Social media turned into a barrage of insults, each post crafted to belittle Newsom, to drag him into the mud where Trump thrived. He mocked California's homelessness crisis, sneered at its progressive policies, and painted Newsom as nothing more than a plastic politician with Hollywood hair and no backbone. His allies amplified the attacks, filling cable news hours with ridicule and scorn. And it wasn't just the right piling on. Even within Democratic circles, questions began to surface. Was Newsom grandstanding at the expense of unity? Was he turning the fight against Trump into a personal spectacle? Critics accused him of vanity, of playing directly into Trump's hands by giving him an excuse to rage louder, meaner, and longer. Headlines shifted from celebrating his bold move to scrutinizing his motives. For a moment, the tide seemed to turn. Trump, for all his fury, knew how to weaponize doubt. Lawsuits were floated, investigations threatened, and whispers of dirt from Newsom's past began to reemerge. The governor who had seized the spotlight now found himself trapped inside it, with nowhere to hide from the glare. For progressives who had felt exhilaration just days before, unease set in. Had Newsom miscalculated? Had he struck too soon, too boldly? Trump looked emboldened, energized by the fight, ready to grind his rival down with the endless stamina of a brawler who had lived his whole life inside the chaos. The moment felt fragile, uncertain. The hero's ascent seemed to stall. Under the weight of criticism and counterattack, was this bold strike a masterstroke or a fatal mistake? Then something unexpected happened. What was supposed to be the death blow to Newsom's momentum began to bend in his favor. Pollsters tracking voter sentiment noticed a shift. Independents, weary of Trump's theatrics, found Newsom's composure refreshing. Progressives, once skeptical of his national ambitions, rallied behind him, grateful that someone finally had the courage to punch back. Even moderates admitted that, while they didn't agree with everything California stood for, they respected the clarity of his challenge. The press, too, began to sense a story bigger than a stunt. Op-eds reframed Newsom's move as a test of whether Democrats could learn to seize the narrative rather than endlessly react. Cable news panels noted the irony. Trump's furious counterattacks meant to bury Newsom only kept him in the spotlight longer. Every insult Trump hurled was replayed alongside clips of Newsom's announcement, giving his message a second life, then a third, then a fourth. And pundits, the same voices that had once dismissed Newsom as a regional player, suddenly elevated him as a contender, maybe not for the presidency yet, but for something more elusive: cultural relevance. He wasn't just surviving the storm, he was gaining strength from it. Trump, blinded by rage, couldn't see that he was amplifying his rival. His fury, his constant need to strike back, guaranteed that Newsom's name remained tethered to his own. And in American politics, proximity to power often is power. What was meant to bury him only made him bigger. For the first time, the idea that Trump's grip could be challenged didn't feel laughable. It felt possible. And as the headlines kept coming, as the polls continued to shift, a new narrative began to take shape, one that Trump could not control. The fight was no longer about one announcement. It was about a spark that refused to die, growing brighter with every attempt to snuff it out. The clash was more than a war of words. It became a test of two political archetypes. On one side stood Donald Trump, the chaos merchant bellowing, with the confidence of a man who had bent the nation's discourse to his will for nearly a decade. His power lay in disruption, in keeping opponents off balance, in turning every confrontation into a carnival where he alone set the rules. On the other side stood Gavin Newsom, the polished challenger, measured yet unflinching, refusing to be swallowed by the noise. His power lay in contrast, in showing that composure could stand against fury, that clarity could rival chaos. The showdown didn't come in a single debate stage or dramatic vote, but in the battlefield of perception. Side by side, Americans compared Trump's anger with Newsom's poise, Trump's grievances with Newsom's vision, Trump's dominance with Newsom's defiance. The juxtaposition told its own story. For the first time in years, the aura of Trump's invincibility cracked. Newsom did not topple him outright. Trump's base remained loyal, his rallies still drew crowds, and his insults still drew laughs among the faithful. But something had changed. The myth that no one could seize the spotlight from Trump had been broken. A new image lingered in the public imagination, the sight of a Democrat who refused to play defense, who dared to claim equal billing in the national narrative. And that shift mattered, because in politics, perception is power, and that day, perception shifted. For Trump, it was a reminder that even kings of spectacle can bleed. For Newsom, it was proof that his voice could resonate beyond California, that his challenge could ripple through the nation's consciousness. And for America, it was the beginning of a new story, one where the giant was no longer untouchable and the underdog was no longer invisible. The spotlight had been shared, and once shared, it could never again belong to one man alone. In the days that followed, the ripples spread far beyond a single press conference. Donors, always eager to back momentum, began to circle. Progressive networks buzzed with speculation about Newsom's next move, whispering about what his sudden prominence might mean for the future of the Democratic Party. Grassroots organizers, long frustrated by a lack of boldness, felt a surge of energy. Here was someone willing to fight on offense, someone unafraid to confront Trump directly. Their enthusiasm spilled across social media, fueling petitions, fundraising drives, and fresh volunteer networks. The media, hungry for storylines, amplified the drama. Was Newsom positioning himself for a presidential run? Was he building a national brand to challenge Trumpism on its own terms? Pundits debated endlessly, but all agreed on one thing. His announcement had elevated him. He was no longer a regional figure. He was now a national one. For Trump, the wound was harder to conceal. His rallies continued, his base remained loyal. But the sting of being upstaged lingered. He railed louder, lashed out harder, but the optics had shifted. For a man obsessed with dominance, the perception that someone else had stolen his thunder was intolerable. His bruised ego became part of the story, and the more he tried to deny it, the clearer it appeared. The announcement may be over, but its shadow lingers. It left both camps altered. Trump reminded of his vulnerability, Newsom elevated to a new arena, and the American public aware that the old order of unchallenged dominance might finally be cracking. The stage was set not just for the next clash, but for a longer battle, one that would test whose vision of America would define the years ahead. So what did we really witness that day? Was it the first crack in Trump's armor, the moment when his stranglehold on America's attention finally began to slip? Or was it just another chapter in his endless war for dominance, another rival destined to be chewed up and forgotten in the churn of his chaos? The answer isn't written yet. What we do know is this: perception shifted. For years, Trump stood untouchable, the master of spectacle. But in one carefully timed strike, Gavin Newsom showed that even giants can stumble, that even the loudest voice can be matched by a sharper one. The fight didn't end with that announcement. It only began. And now the stakes are larger than one clash of egos. They're about who defines America's story moving forward, the merchant of chaos or the challenger of clarity. The question lingers, heavy and unresolved. Did we just witness the beginning of Trump's unraveling, or the ignition of an even fiercer storm? Because if you think this was big, if you think this moment changed everything, then brace yourself. The battles ahead will make this look like the calm before the real storm.